One of the worst things about our current system of government is that they either create the conditions or allow the conditions to be created that cause us, the average citizen, consequences. And when we are the ones who have to pay for those consequences, it's a definite imbalance. For instance, abortion has been a hot topic throughout Trump's term, which is what, pro-life, freedom of choice. What the hell does that even mean, folks? Or pro-choice, rather. Pro-choice means a different thing than freedom of choice. I don't really know what the heck they're really talking about, to the point that you cannot create the conditions for the female American citizen to not have control over her own body, and then force her to take care of the consequences of your decision. If you are controlling her body, then you are acting as her parent or her guardian or her authority, and then therefore you're the papa. Get on Maury, baby, because it's right there. Draw a straight line to you. If you don't create a condition of safety for the female American citizen, especially coming out of high school, looking to establish a foothold in the world, and then you say, oh, well, hey, you were born with ovaries. You caught. Good luck with that. There is no one single specific easy answer, because even birth control has side effects. So not every birth control works for every person, because we love our kids and we want the best for them. But so many times we get stuck in this rigid set of fake beliefs that they have to conform to, or they're not acceptable. Now, this is Southern fried thinking, if you will. I had an uncle. He's dead, passed on. My dad's twin brother. He was a preacher. And the amount of punishment he visited on his children for not conforming, or on his first kid, was so damaging. And it was damaging in far-reaching ways over into my family and others, in the clan, so to speak, in our close family. So I was forced to confront that as a teenager, because the child that was about 10 years older than me. So I was a young lad when she went through, and it was a sketchy abortion, messed her up, And she was unable to reproduce after that, and then she had a miracle child. So, things work out for the best in the long run, usually. Hopefully. But this is about parenting, I guess. Because, and freedom of choice, it's kind of the same thing. We, as a family, make decisions that affect our children. We decide what kind of people we want them to be. But hell, we're pretty childish in our own decisions as a nation. At least, as to where we want to be. And most people stay away from politics and religion because there's so much childishness about it. You're going to believe what I tell you, you're going to think about what I tell you, and you're going to think about it the way I tell you. That's our society today. But instead of overlaying a set of values on you, the listener, I'm inviting you to take the space, take a beat, put a pause before your beliefs, and think about what is going on, not just in our nation, but in our world, and quit listening to the same old, and look at the other side of the aisle. I don't care what side you're on. If we don't start reaching across the aisle, we're about to rip this nation apart. This winner-take-all theology or political ideology is not working. And that's what cuts most people down from voting, is because I have good values, but I don't see any coming from my politicians. And inactivity is its own set of poor values. If you, the only way for evil to triumph is for good men to stand by and do nothing. And guess what? There's a hell of a lot of that happening. The good people are standing by and doing nothing and waiting for the crazies to fight it out. I think they're in a armed standoff in Georgia right now. I don't know. It's protesters. I don't know. I mean, I'm not paying attention to that right now because, like most of America, I've had my fill of rage. I'm ready to move on past tactical thinking and into strategic thinking. And that's what I'm calling out here for the people who want to listen to me. Creating that space that gives you a chance to look past the end of your nose when you don't have somebody telling you exactly what to think about or exactly how to think about it. Now, I started this talking about freedom of choice and abortion, so I'm going to swing back to that. It is about that. That's what brought me to this. But the actual idea is that you cannot create or allow to be created the conditions and then walk away from the mess that was made and demand that the people who live there live with it. And, you know, they've done this to us so many times that it feels normal. Flint, Michigan. Ooh, okay, so we got a new documentary on Netflix, don't we? And what is anybody really doing about it? I mean, they had to fix it themselves, and what, everybody gets a lot of money, all the people get killed and maimed or poisoned, and there's not a satisfactory resolution in that, and that's why you keep hearing the name. Same thing with George Floyd. Don't really hear that much about it nowadays, unless you listen to certain people. But once the next step happens, like the officers get into court, there's going to be another uproar about it, because nobody feels satisfied about it. And, you know, the danger with the Rodney King trial came whenever it didn't come until the officers involved were just let off scot-free, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, because that was a long time ago for me, and I was not there. I looked at it from my portion of the United States from an armchair, just like most people. But I do remember the phrase being bantered around back then, that the police would always treat you like a king. So, I hear about a lot of the Black Lives Matter community talk about reparations. It's the same argument from the Trail of Tears, man. You know, yes, you can't, you're not going to get reparations. You're not going to get built up above others. And that's not what you're supposed to be fighting for anyways. It's equality. Everybody has the same opportunities. We're fighting for a decent baseline for our country, for everybody, for our children. And whether you're black or white or any purple, any color in between, does not matter. Everybody needs the same baseline opportunity. Now listen, we have the technology, we have the resources to fully automate and fund every child's education on this planet, at least in our nation. It wouldn't take much of a serious freaking push to put it online and have teachers still there, but for the lectures, for the talking about different things. You're always going to need some human interaction. You're always going to need to be able to ask questions, but that will be able to be done remotely now through a computer. And, you know, my son, during his leukemia, we tried so many different ways And the electronic school system at the time was not up to the task. And the one that they came up with since the COVID-19 put out, my son gave it a thumbs up. He loves it. So, just saying that you've got an online school doesn't cut it either. People act as if people who need help deserve nothing. And that is so exactly the opposite. Leaders are not... you don't get lucky with leaders, okay? You don't. Somebody crafts a leader. Somebody creates an individual who is not only able but willing to lead. And we can easily do that in America if we choose to do that. But, if it's not for money, then it's not for nothing, honey. Because money's the only value that we carry in America, value for a human life. What do you produce for the state or the oligarch? Do you lead a giant company? Do you, how many jobs? No, it's not even necessarily how many jobs you produce, because we have a lot of really money-oriented businesses that have nothing to do with people. All you need people for is data entry. Somebody to be told what to do. It's hard to lead people because it becomes exhausting. You're constant. If you don't set up a set of rules for people to follow, then you have to tell them what to do every single day. My point is, there's a point to the corporation, and it's a good structure, and you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's a light and a dark side to everything. But you cannot allow a corporation to be created, make money, do damage, fall apart, and get looted and disappear. It happens quite often. And, sometimes accidentally, sometimes by design. There's so many ways to deliberately milk the system to get money without producing a good result. I mean, isn't that what many people say about Donald Trump and his Trump University and stuff like that? I'm not really getting into Trump, guys. So he's doing his own thing for himself. I mean, good on you if you vote for him, but Biden is oil on troubled waters. That's all he is. Don't get bent out of shape about it, because there's no other machinery to run our country, unless you want to let the broken Republicans who have no moral fibers to stand on keep running our country. Keep saying, well, at least we got the power, when they probably can't even look themselves in the mirror every morning. There's a certain... when you enter politics, I am certain that you should have a certain expectation of being able to compromise, of having to compromise your ideals over time. Because that's what politics is. It's the art of compromise. But when you get stuck in an extreme pattern, or people get scared of Trump, I mean, come on, man, this is a cult of personality like none other since Jim Jones. It's just as much damage, but we need leaders to step up and mourn our dead as a nation. That's one thing I'm still angry about since this started, is that every bit of news has been about Trump and denying anything while the numbers just rack up. So we've got, I haven't looked in a couple of days, maybe a week. But last I read that here in America, 160,000 dead people. Now, 1,000 people's names on the Wall Street Journal, that just don't cut it. That doesn't give me a chance to mourn the wound in our nation. I don't know any of those people. I have not personally been affected by somebody who died through the COVID-19. I live in Oklahoma. It's currently, I think, is one of the safest states in the union, because everybody stays at home here. We're all homebodies. already. And us and Kansas and Arkansas. Hang on. Creating a basic survivability platform for people is not communism. That should be the very function. This should be the very basic function of government, is to distribute food and shelter and defense. And if the government is not there to care for the citizenry, then it's there to feed off them. And there is a certain basic level of, what do you call it, sustainability out there. But if you get caught up in the judicial system, I don't think you really get that. There's so many ways it can be taken away from you in the name of meeting budgets and economics and stuff like that. But then, Bernie has got a good idea in one sense, that we need the basics for everybody. And I think it's ridiculous for Republicans to still act like we all being kicked out of the cotton fields at the same time, and we just all have to take care of ourselves, and then create the conditions that it's nearly impossible for us to rise up from that situation. This is a different way to do that same thing. Yes, Black Lives Matter. And when Black Lives Matter, all lives will matter. But until the trouble gets into Republicans, conservatives' front yard, ain't going to do nothing about it. There's not enough of them that are civic-minded or have enough sense of duty to your country to actually consider and do things about it. Because all you do is listen to plausible justifications all day long. And if you listen to Christian programming, you're very focused on the word. Great. And filling your head up with the word, and that can be a very good thing. And yet when you do that, you're once again having to be told what to think about and how to think about it on a minute-by-minute basis. And if you're not able to take that, if you're never able to give something from that, if you don't have an overabundance of connectedness with your Creator, and you're not willing to share that with your fellow man, then what exactly are you doing but hiding from responsibility, sitting in a pew, and trading that sense of responsibility for comfort? And those of us who don't agree with this cult of subjugation don't have an organization to live in, to raise our children in. That's why you see the Mormon Church is so successful, because honestly, it's built around family and unity, and there will never cease being a need for that. And the idea of banding people together as a village, okay, I'm not really promoting the patriarchal views of Mormonism, okay? I'm talking about the lack of a safe place to land for anybody in the United States, pretty much. Hardships creates issues for people to deal with. And if there's not a plausible way for everybody to survive, you're going to have a lot more. Crime's going to shoot up. The more people get desperate, the more that social contract is broken, then the more crime you're going to have. And it's a perpetuating cycle. If we can't see that by now, then, geez, we're so blinded by personalities that we think a single person is Jesus. Trump ain't Jesus. Trump's the anti-Jesus. And no, he's not the Antichrist. He's a buffoon. You can raise your children to be the leaders that our country needs. The other day, I was looking on social media, and I saw this short video. I like to watch little short 1-minute video clips and stuff, and it was a black father with his child. And what he was doing was he was quizzing his child on the video. And he was sitting there asking him, and this little kid answered every single question exactly right without hesitation about mortgages, money, power, the structures, whether you want to rent or own your home. Now, I can't say I completely agreed with the father because he was, promoting this idea of home ownership as your sense of value in the United States. And, I'm starting to really thoroughly disagree with that, even though I was part of it for my whole life. I think that we need to be in such a society as crowded as we've got now. We need the ability to be able to move from one state to another, one place to another in a pretty rapid fashion, because the needs of the nation are going to change over time. And I don't think we quite understand that yet, because we haven't had that logistics breakdown yet. We haven't had a serious happening yet. We just quietly let 160,000 of our citizens pass away without a peep. I don't understand why we don't have a public naming of all the victims of the virus once a week. I don't understand why we don't take a weekend or two to name all of the victims that we've lost due to this virus. Give our nation a chance to mourn that we've been denied over and over and over. So yeah, while this was originally about free choice and abortion, it's more about what do you do with the mess left behind when you allow the government to allow the corporations to take all the good and leave all the crap behind and never clean it up and walk away from it, whether it's in another country or our own backyard. Now, as long as it ain't visible, you can have invisible poisons all you want all over the United States, but as long as it looks pretty. You can't have an ecosystem in your front yard because it doesn't look pretty. Because oh my gosh, there will be bugs there. But we were meant to get dirty. Our immune system is meant to fight infections over time, over our lives. That doesn't mean you seek out danger, but maybe seek out nature and get sick the normal way. I got sick every year until I was 12 years old and got my tonsils out. And, my kid didn't have the kind of immune exposure that I got from nature. And so when he lost his appendix, that physical trauma, I believe, created his, leukemia. That's my best guess on it. So the point is, we need to start getting a little bit dirty. We need to quit being so sanitary. But at the same time, that doesn't mean go rub your biology with other human beings right now, because the COVID virus is not the same as what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the general health of our population. When we have tried so hard to make the physical world resemble the simplicity of the Christian narrative. Something everybody can understand, even if it's not true. Just give me an answer I can agree with, that works for me, for now. So, a lot of people in our nation are getting really off balance as a satellite victim to Republicans in general. Donald Trump and all his enablers. I've never in my life would I imagine that things would be so bad that Republicans would walk away from the party and and actively support the Democrats. But that's pretty much what's happened, because there's very few people. There's a difference between people who decide to support principles over power. That's the kind of person we need in office, because the power is too scary. It's too dangerous for somebody as volatile as somebody who's narcissistic in a clinical way. I believe that there's a big difference. Now, Trump has narcissistic personality disorder. He's a classic example. I mean, go on YouTube and look it up and look at what a narcissist does, and then look at Trump's tweets. Don't look at what people say about him. Look at what he says about himself. The fruits of the Spirit are shown by what's in your heart. If I used to drive past that guy standing on the corner with the sign, "We'll work for food," or whatever. And, since I've been working with this guy, I've been taking this route, and there's a guy standing on the corner there, and twice I've given him a $5 bill. And, it did not hurt me to give him a $5 bill. And I now recognize that we need to help people like that, but not to the tune of making it worth $80,000 a year to stand on a corner with your hand held out. I know that's an extreme, but we've got the kind of environment in our country where extremism is necessary. It is the norm. If there is a way to exploit something, or somebody, then somebody's going to find a way to do it, and then they're going to do it. And that's unfortunate, because this Republican idea is kind of what do you call it? They created it, and then they said it was true, and now it is true, and now they've created their own problems. And it's not just Republicans. It's the hyperpartisanship and the ties to power on both sides. Because in our country, money is the only thing that has any value whatsoever. Human life, we lost that barometer long ago. We've never really had it. We're still working our way up the evolutionary ladder on a government basis, And I think that we've pretty much come to the point where we're ready to have some serious discussion over the next 4 years, no matter who takes office. And to me, it's very curious, because I feel like the cult of personality won't win out this time. But I'm quite curious to see, because, geez, man, I love my country, and I love all the people in it. I've served in the military, and when you do that, you don't really have a choice but to examine yourself, your country, and know what you're fighting for. For me, I was in the Navy, and so I went to a lot of places. I went to Japan, went to Australia, did a tour all the way through the Persian Gulf, went to Hawaii, went to Vancouver, but then I went to a lot of third world holes. And everywhere I went, I tended to look for the underbelly. I wanted to see how the poor people lived. And in many countries, I saw conditions about the same as they are in Mexico for a migrant settler. In Mexico, when they have mass migrations happen all the time because of all the unrest going on to all our neighbors in the south. So what happens, like in Tijuana, it's a border town. During the time I was there, stationed in California, I would often go on the Mexico side, cross at Tijuana, and then drive to Tecate. Sandy Shed Road border crossing. It's about, whatever. It's where my girlfriend, who became my wife, is where she originally lived when I first met her. And her father lived there. So I often went on the Mexico side, sometimes on the United States side, but the United States side was like a real winding, and on the other side there was a toll road. And along that toll road, before you hit the mountains that it went through, was these vast pieces of land that people owned. And they would just have a community spring up literally overnight. In 1 month from the time you saw a first set of houses being built, they would have 300 or 400, 500 houses. Everybody, they laid them out in straight rows. And you know what they built them with? OSB, chipboard. It's the stuff we use for our decking on our roofs. And then we laid the asphalt shingles on top of that. It's oriented strand board. It's just, a whole bunch of chips. It's just a real thin, anything that's, and then they put a basic shelter roof over it. There is anything but a dirt floor for a long time. And then what they do is they live there, even through the winter, and they keep working. And as they start working, then they put money into that spot of land that they settled on. Now, the people that originally owned the land always get upset, but at this point, Mexico kind of has a method to deal with that, and they just take it from them, eminent domain, but they let them. I don't know about whether or not they purchase it, or I don't know how they treat the landowners. I don't know anything about that. I'm telling you what I saw, and I asked about it, and I researched it when I was in the Navy. It was interesting to me. And this whole community sprang up overnight with these shanties. And then as the people got established and started working in Tijuana, mind you, because it was like 5 minutes out of town. Or actually, it was right on the edge of town. That's how the town just keeps growing into a megapolis that it's become. Now, if they just put lines on the asphalt so people would know where the lanes are, that'd be great. Of course, that was 25 years ago. I don't know now. But these communities, then, as they'd work, they would build the outer walls, and eventually you would see a couple of houses with concrete floors and brick walls, and they'd go from having an outhouse in the backyard to, having a septic or whatever the sewer system they decide on. People, there's just as many homeless electricians to go in there and rig electricity for everybody. I mean, literally, it's a whole bunch of homeless people setting up a town and building it out, and then going and getting work in town, and then coming back and building their houses until they have a place to live. That's how my ex-wife's father built his house, and he built a 3-story concrete house. But for years, he still had an outhouse. And eventually, and as far as water pressures, we get our water pressure in America from these giant water towers, okay? You put all that water up, and you keep that water pressure full, and it pushes that water down, and it gives you a few pounds of pressure throughout the whole main of the system. And that's why we, in America, get water straight out of our faucet. But in Mexico, you have to buy your own tank and put it on your roof. It's like a 500 gallon, I think. Huge. It's, it's like 5 foot wide and about chest high. And, it's got a lid on it. And what you do in Mexico, when you have water pressure, you're lucky, because it can go days without it. Sometimes, you'll get 2 or 3 hours of water pressure at a time. And so you have to buy your own personal reservoir. and then you put it on your roof, and then that gives you the pressure to feed the water system in your house. We managed to do it by shrinking down the amount. That's why we have smaller pipes going all the way to your faucet. But in Mexico, you've got to create all of this on your own. And we're about to see this kind of behavior in the United States. Because, if there's not some sort of relief or some sort of restriction, because, you can't tell landlords you have to eat it, okay? Because they have bills to pay as well. I don't think there's a landlord in the United States besides Jared Kushner that doesn't have a lot of debt to service that they have to pay. So, like when I ran a 10-unit apartment complex that I found and I renovated and I rented out, I made about $30,000 a year from it. And that was pretty much a full-time job. So, and it took me 2 years to build up to that too, and I put in a lot of money into that. So I got lucky because I found something that was doable and workable. And I ran it for a decade before I sold it. Not your typical flip. There's a certain responsibility, some certain basic functions that we need to start from scratch and start discussing. That's kind of what I'm doing on everything. Whether you call it flat earth looking or scorched earth or whatever, let's start at the beginning. Let's start at the basics. What's the purpose of government? Is it not to make sure that all its citizens get fed and are provided the opportunities to make the nation stronger? Now, you don't take away opportunities and give such restrictions to people who have not the resources to overcome all those restrictions. You can't even recreate the same experiments that gave us electricity or chemistry without, having a big corporation, a lot of money to be responsible for that. And yet, when your business ethics preclude human ethics, I think we need to really make a big distinction between the sets of belief systems. Let's kind of break it out and lay it out and expose it and talk about it in our country and get away from the language of manipulation and back into the language of persuasion. And that's what it is. Right now we've got all this batch programming based on any label that you'd care to name. It's not right. And it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater every single time. You say, oh, look, I found a speck of dirt. Throw out the whole thing. And that's kind of our attitude with every kind of belief system that you can imagine. Whether it be a political belief system, an economic belief system, or a religious belief system. So those are three different belief systems that I think we need to really sit down and define where they're different. And define what we want to allow them to be different for. If we keep going, I swear, the first trillionaire on the planet, seriously, that's kind of where we're headed right now. And that's unreasonable to the whole world. I'm sorry. It's time for an upper limit. And, and this is in a world where the minimum wage is pretty damn close to the same as it was when I was in high school. When I got out of high school, it was $10 an hour to get in the bottom of a ditch and shovel dirt, okay? Now, that's not minimum wage because you won't find somebody, well, at that time, you couldn't find somebody to work for minimum wage in the bottom of a ditch. So it was $10 an hour. I am 50 years old now, 51. And, now the going rate is $15 an hour for somebody to get in a ditch. That I'm talking your very basic menial work under direction that anybody can do. As long as they have the awareness to look out for a backhoe or track hoe bucket and not get hit by it, then that's all it really takes. But, I was surprised that it finally went up. My 82-year-old father, finally started paying somebody $15 an hour for the same kind of work. And I'm talking about in a general, I'm an entrepreneur, I need to hire somebody for a dirty job. What am I going to hire? What am I going to pay them for? That used to be, like I said, $10 an hour, and now it's 15. But minimum wage ain't even $15 an hour right now. And that's what it should be. The problem that is that whenever we talk about these things, the moment the cost goes up for the business, the moment the prices go up. So it's a kind of a self-defeating thing to talk about, the minimum wage. And I think we need to take some of these things that are basic human values and remove them from the financial system. Don't get me wrong. But I think it's time for the government to get back into the food distribution system, to tell you the truth. And because if they're not prepared for it, if we know it's coming, we see it happening almost in real time, slow motion, we're going to have more problems. Denying the COVID crisis doesn't change it, okay? So about the only thing that we could probably do right now, I have a few ideas. I'd like to see a third political party, but more importantly, I'd like a way for us to, as human beings, to worship our Creator without, metaphorically eating raw cactus spines to do it, to be able to worship the Creator. We're all connected with the power of creation, and then we're told we're not. And then we believe that, and everything else gets broken because we believe that link is broken. Because we've been told that link is broken. What's the first thing that you understand as a child? The words, "What is wrong with you?" No, slap. And then later, when you get the language, "What is wrong with you?" Every time you do something wrong, you will hear some version of that unless the parent is very, very specific about keeping the mindfulness, the awareness of the future person that baby is going to be. If we don't groom our children, then for leadership, then we won't ever produce the results that we want to see in the world. So what we need to do is really start grooming our children and start talking to our leaders and start talking amongst ourselves. I think it's time that we opened up some dialogues about some of these things that are dividing us, because I don't think there's very many of them. There's very few of them that actually divide our country. All of it is theater, Hollywood, politics, greed, and grasping for power. Has nothing to do with governing the United States in a positive direction. It's all about looting, not leading. So, if we want to see a moral leadership, we're going to have to create our own moral leadership by raising our children in a positive moral fashion. If you start really hammering home to each kid that they already have the sovereign right to be here, nobody can tell them different. Nobody is any more or less deserving of a first chance than anybody else, or a second chance, or a third chance. Because if somebody doesn't receive the help they need to get that second chance, then it becomes, when people are just drug along the ground and they don't really get the help that's qualified, the mental health pandemic in our country has been going on a very long time, because people recognize the absurdity of the language of manipulation, but so many people have learned to just accept it. I like such and such person, so I'm going to listen to him, and then you get that one point of view. And maybe you'll get bored with that and move on to something else. The worst thing we can do is to quit questioning, to quit looking, to quit seeking, start thinking that we know everything, to start thinking that we have a firm set of beliefs. Why not try the Yahweh way? The force of creation. Everybody is created and a part of creation. Life will always prevail. And if we humans don't want to be here, that's okay. Life will keep going on. We are not immune from extinction. We have the capability to avoid extinction. But if we can't start using that in a positive fashion, somebody with a vision like Elon Musk, but, not concerned. Elon Musk has got a great vision. The survival of humanity. A second planet for us to grow on. Everybody can recognize that. That's why he's so successful, and he's done it the Heinlein way, the Robert Heinlein way. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay. He was a science fiction writer. But when we start grooming our children, when we start grooming them in mass numbers for leadership, that's when we'll produce our Bill Gates in politics. That's when we'll produce our Elon Musk in social reform. And look what money can do to you. People get unhinged when they're given too much power and they don't know what to do with it. And, I'm not going to get into mental health right now because we're talking about freedom of choice and the responsibility of government. So I think it's time to sit down and define the responsibilities of government. If you can't say that government has to provide food for everybody, when the COVID-19 hit, I bought myself a 20-pound bag of beans and a 20-pound bag of rice, dried. I stuck them in the closet, and that was about all I did. I didn't start hoarding toilet paper or anything like that. Just so that it's there for a long-term storage. If things break down, then I'll be eating rice and beans, and that's about all I'll be eating probably. Because, during the COVID-19, what I learned is that you can go through everything in your house and eat, and if you're deliberately trying to deplete your own stockpiles, then it took me about a month to go through my larder and eat, even if sometimes it was just a can of ranch-style beans. When we as a society band together with intent and start focusing on creating leaders, and we can't really focus on creating leaders until we know what we want them to say, what we want them to stand for, what we want them to lead us into. Because to tell you the truth, we have 3, maybe 4 sets of disconnected sets of values that we judge our nation by, how we're doing. And unfortunately, human rights is not really one of those. It's not one of those that we can all agree on. It's something that we battle over all the time. And it's essentially a fight for resources. It's a fight for resources and power. When what we're seeing right now isn't really, oh my gosh, let's fight for resources. It's let's fight for control over everything. And, I think it's time for us to have a serious discussion as a nation about green energy versus carbon-based energy versus, solar, wind. There's a lot of different ways to make electricity. There's a hydrogen cell for cars that goes 1,000 miles between fill-ups. How would that be for a basic power plant in a home? Based on hydrogen that you could run your whole home on, but that the technology wasn't developed in that way. It didn't seem quite as promising, and then Elon Musk came along with Tesla, and electric cars just, all it waited. It was an idea that sat around for a long time, and all it needed was somebody like Elon Musk who was driven by his own dreams, You can look at Elon Musk right now and say that is the way it's supposed to work. That's what our structure is there for. But then you look at things, calling the social media giants to the carpet before Congress is a poser facade. Didn't do a damn thing. I get my thinking directed by Mark Zuckerberg as much as he can. Since Facebook took over Instagram, I constantly get ads in Spanish because 20 years ago, my daughter, or 15 years ago or so, my daughter got on my account and watched a bunch of stuff in Espanol. I don't speak it. And that's how I can tell you exactly when Facebook took over. And also it's all full of ads and stuff like that. And they limited my feed. You have to actually, go out there and look. It doesn't matter who you follow. You don't get fed your followers. You only get fed a few. It's time for new legislation to speak about these end user agreements. These are things that we've talked about for a long time. My point is that you can't base an entire new political arm or religious based on just one or two issues. It has to be all-encompassing. You have to be able to wrap your head around the whole ball of wax, so to speak. You have to be able to agree with most of what is said. And I think that's the problem, because a lot of us, we agree in theory, yes, everybody deserves to have equal rights, as long as I get mine first. And then when the radio is always telling you that you are getting yours, then you believe it. Because if you listen to Republican radio, then you don't hear anything but bad news about Democrats and good news about Republicans. And if you listen to anybody else, you get the exact opposite. Because the Republicans, they stick to their feed, and it's self-reinforcing. It's the same thing as Christianity. It's a cult of subjugation. They'll follow the leader, just like a lemming, right off the cliff. That's an encouraging thought, except they'll do a lot of damage when they do, along the way. This Trumpism is a new term. Guess what? It's not in the dictionary. It wasn't a word before Trump came along. It's nothing to do with the Constitution, does it? So I have heard a lot of the words Founding Fathers and Constitution from the Republican side. And I beg to differ with them, because I think they've lost perspective. And they're using it as a tool the same way Trump used the Bible as a tool. So I think it's time that we evolved our understanding of God, of Yahweh, the forces of creation that we're already connected with, that you were told that you weren't connected with. I want you to remember that Yahweh is in you already, and there's no disconnect between you and Yahweh, except for what you believe. If you believe that because you've been told that. So it's more about unprogramming yourself than it is. You've heard the terms empty yourself. Well, you can't do that if you're not grounded and if somebody else owns your thoughts. I want you to own your own thoughts. And I pray that you will find a little bit of peace in grounding and in the knowledge that you are a child of God. You are a sovereign human being. You have every right to be on this earth. This earth is made for us to be a part of. And yet, I would encourage you to quit spraying your weeds and your insects in your yard. Let a little crabgrass grow here and there. Maybe plant a garden. If you want to get in touch with God, then you need to nourish You need to nourish another, nurture another. Whether it be a cat or a dog or a person, that doesn't mean lose yourself in that. But the act of nurturing, whether you grow in a garden, making music, that's nurturing humans. Now, I found 3 good paths to wisdom, and they all involve nurturing. And when I was done with my seeking, I decided I was going to nurture either animals, plants, or humans. And I finally got to the point where I felt I could nurture humans. So that's what I'm doing here. And I hope that you will accept the idea that it's time to turn a pitying eye on our parents. It's time to diagnose what's wrong with them, to figure out what they did to us, and figure out where some of our ideas come from. Let me tell you something. These common ideas that we learn in school carry through to our adult lives. The insecurities, the feelings that we don't belong. Everybody has the spark of God inside of them. And if you can recognize that, if we could all get on the same page about that humanity, that human beings are sovereign creatures, that we all have a right to exist, to belong, and to participate in the ecosystem on our planet. Even if that ecosystem has been 90% wiped out by our own activities, we have the chance to change it. And no, we're not going to stop the melting of the ice caps or anything like that. It's way too late for that. We've got to adapt to survive. And if we don't, we won't. And that's kind of what I see happening in politics in our country right now. Those who are adapting are surviving. You know, it doesn't matter what you say when you come to the pulpit. If somebody's ready for change, you say boo, and they say, oh, I want to get saved at the church. That's because people get lost. They get stuck in a dark well of despair. You feel like you're scrambling around in the dark because you're full of that therapy-induced self-reflection. The depression is self-reflection. It's all about what is wrong with me. And I'm here to tell you that there is nothing wrong with you. You just have been told that there is. And there is nothing at all wrong with you. It doesn't matter if you've hurt others along the way through your pain. Okay? Yes, there is restitution to make there. But until you can look back on the person that did whatever it was to you and look at yourself as a healthy, happy, God-filled being already connected with the forces of creation, only then can you figure out what was wrong with you and why you get stuck in the depression. We always get stuck because when we go to seek help, whoever we turn to, the idea is they reflect it back on you. Well, it's your own fault. You're going to have to get over it yourself. You're going to have to get over yourself. But there's not really a path to doing that. We have so many things that we are taught about, and it turns out they're all trees in the same forest. Codependency, triggers, all these terms that people use to define what's wrong with you, not with whoever did what it was to you. And I think that's what it comes down to. Our pattern of manipulation and deflection in our language, it causes people to feel invalid. It causes them to feel like they're not allowed to exist. They're not welcome on this earth. And I'm telling you that you are. You have every right as a sovereign human being. And I don't care if you're in prison. I don't care if who you are, what your economic station is in life. Okay? Now, once you feel yourself connected with the power of creation, connected with the Creator, that you know, once you know without a doubt that He's there, everything changes in perspective. You have an overabundance to share with others. And if you don't have that outflowing of the powers of creation, of Yahweh, then people are going to be repelled by that rather than attracted. Because any time that we see pain, our automatic protection defense mechanisms kick in. So when those defense mechanisms kick in, we automatically do not receive anything. We're automatically projecting a blockage, okay? Now, it's really hard to figure out who to listen to, what opinions there are. It took me 3 years of just reading the news instead of watching it at night or listening to it during the day. You know, opinion news shows are not really news, right? They're opinion shows. And they're not held to the same fact checking that journalism is. And we are a nation that is overflowing and over-flooded with opinions. Nobody's on the same page. Nobody's talking about the same thing unless it's a propagandic organizational message. I'm not here to give you all the answers, but I am here to talk about some of the hot button topics affecting our nation. And to help you kind of get a little bit of perspective. That's really what I'm selling, is perspective. Put a comma before your belief. Put a pause before your instant judgment. It's time to start asking questions as a nation again, because we obviously have a long way to go to regain a spirit of cooperation. We're definitely not united in anything right now. The United States of America, the purpose of the federal government is to unite us under the big things, to deal with the crisis situations, to keep everybody on the same page so that we didn't turn into communist Russia, where there are checkpoints at every intersection. The fracturing of our division as a nation gets lost in the argument for states' rights. That's what they call it when they don't want to deal with it. States' rights. We're going to let the states deal with it. And when you pit everybody against each other for the same resources, what you see is the massive circus that we just went through for the past 6 or 7 months. The most significant thing I heard Donald Trump say during the COVID pandemic is, it's an issue of liability. We got to keep the meat flowing, but you can't make the meat for all the people that are going to die producing that meat. Now, the meat price went way the hell up. Part of that was due to scarcity. But isn't that kind of the same bullshit thing that always happens? The meat producer, are they actually passing on that cost increase to the ones that died on their watch while creating that product? No, because corporations eat people. The corporation is the apex predator of our time. But you know what? The one thing that they don't want us to do is band together to take down a corporation. Because if you manage to put enough people together in a boycott for a long enough period of time, a corporation will wither and die and go away. Now, Facebook needs to be government regulated at this point, but also watchdogged, because Mark Zuckerberg has curtailed so many of my freedoms with his malware in my computer, and stolen so much of my information without my explicit consent. That doesn't mean you hide it in the fine print. And I think it's time, don't you think it's time that we discuss our legal system and adjust it a little bit? Because this idea of end user agreements is just one example. When you're given a choice, and it's an all or nothing choice, and if you don't choose that, then you get nothing. But if you do choose that, then you lose all sorts of rights. And that is manipulative language That's business ethics, using the English language in a manipulative way to steal all of your perceived human rights. You no longer have the right to your own information. George Orwell, 1984, his Big Brother story. And we now have cameras in your TV watching you as you live in your undies. They've decided to sell you the TV, but in order to use the software to operate it, they're going to spy on you in your room and watch all your choices and suck up all your personal information and force feed you a mono diet of whatever it is that they decide is good for you. Now, there's a big difference between using AI or gathering information, because that's what an AI, a personal assistant, would need to do. Okay? And that's kind of the goal. Can I get a robotic assistant to help me do the things that I can't do right now? That's what AI is for, right? It's not necessarily to make a factory more efficient. Okay? That's not... Sure, that's a good example, but that's not one of the primary examples. Once again, we're coming at it from a human ethics standpoint, a standpoint of human morality, and comparing it to business ethics. What's lacking there? What's missing there?